or jump around. So yeah, thank you so much for having me here today, and it's been really great to reconnect with my colleagues here. It's been a little while, so yeah, it's just a treat to be here. And yesterday we got to go visit a school and talk to the kids, and that's what I find most rewarding as well. So I love Northern Ireland. You have a great country and really kind people. So thanks for always welcoming me in the work. So yes, hope, a global imperative. So I've gotten a little help on this presentation, or I've presented in the past with Dr. Myron Belfast and Christy Stark. And so I just want to honor them and acknowledge them a little bit. And again, thanks for having me here. I wanted to start out actually with a little bit of my own personal story. These are some pictures of my life when I was young. I have two older brothers. You can see up there in the corner. And I had a pretty great childhood. I grew up in Chicago, and I had a cabin in northern Wisconsin, and got to horseback ride and snowmobile, and had fun birthday parties. So I had a pretty, we had a lot of fun, and we were a close-knit family, went on a lot of vacations together. And there is a picture of my dad. We had a place in Lake Geneva, and my dad was a banker. He was a vice president of finance and worked closely with Walmart and Sam Walton, and was very well respected and regarded. And when I was 19, I lost my father to suicide. He died by suicide. And he was an amazing man, and a great hero to me. And he also was untreated with mental health for a long time. And that had consequences on me personally growing up, with his unregulated emotions and his anger. And it had consequences when I lost him, when he wasn't able to get the treatment that he needed. I saw within my dad a biological change happening when his anger would come about, but nobody did anything about it. I mean, people really ignored it because people didn't really know what to do. And I saw this man who was just such a hero to me, and well-educated and respected and loved and admired, and he wasn't getting the help he needed. And it was a great tragedy, clearly, in my life. But as I said, my dad had untreated mental health issues, and that has an impact on the family. And he was an angry person part of the time. That was a part of who he was. And so when I internalized a lot of that anger. So when I was probably 10, I started turning to addictions as a way to deal with them. Internal pain, not really knowing what else to do. So I started self-medicating with smoking, drinking, just general reckless behavior. And this, again, was when I was 10 years old, and we didn't talk about mental health in schools, and we didn't talk about what to do about it. So I eventually was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, addictions. I had the genetic predisposition. I had major life events. I had traumatic childhood events. But fortunately for me, I was allowed and I was able to get treatment. Now, it did take me a while. Even losing my dad, I attempted as well in my early 20s to take my life, because I couldn't deal with the pain of it, the pain of life. And it wasn't until I was about 33 that I actually got really serious about treatment. I got sober, I got clean of all my addictions, and I got really serious about making a difference in the space. That being said, I was very, I got an MBA. I worked for American Express, 3M. I worked for ad agencies. So I was very, I was highly functioning in terms of my mental health, and yet still, it was impacting me. So I worked for a number of companies. When I was 33, I decided to start my own company. and I wanted to give back in the space of mental health. I was starting my own brand. It was a light bulb brand based on colors and moods, and I wanted to do a cause marketing campaign for mental health. So I went to look at some charities relating to mental health. The imagery, if I Googled, depression, and every single image was, there's a person in the corner hiding, crying, or there were tears coming down their faces, and I just thought, how can we do how can, as a business with this new brand, and I'm wanting to go out to the world and talk to celebrities about it, this feels so hopeless. Like, this doesn't feel like if I put money towards this issue, it's anything that I'm going to be able to solve. And what I found as I started digging into further, that actually depression and anxiety are very solvable. General mental health issues are treatable, but we're just not getting treatment. And again, primarily due to stigma. And stigma leads to lack of funding and a number of other issues associated with it. I was bootstrapping my company. I had no money, and I thought, well, I'll just create a nonprofit, and we'll rebrand depression, because I came from a marketing and business background, and I thought that's really what it needed. We needed to refocus, reposition how we're talking about mental health and depression. So I got to looking first at what did breast cancer do, what did AIDS do, how did they rebrand, because these were once also highly stigmatized conditions. So, and that was the goal of the nonprofit. It was really to shine a positive light on depression, eliminate the stigma, rebrand the disease through prevention, research, and education. So we use, and breast cancer, pink ribbon, they got celebrities engaged and they talked about the biology of the body. Those were 3 key things that they did that really transformed breast cancer. It was very highly stigmatized at one time. So we focus on the sunflower as a universal symbol. We use positive language right now to impact our positive mental health in a positive way. We engage with celebrities and encourage them to talk about their own mental health issues. Leaders in corporations, encouraging them to be open with their employees about it. And we educate on the biology of the brain. And as much as we know, we don't know very much about it in looking at how complex of an organ it is, but we think the more we learn and the more we talk about that, the more it'll be helpful. Because the reality is, right now, people think that this is primarily still a decision, a behavioral decision people make, and it's not a behavioral decision. There are a number, as you all know, of things that go into mental health. So it's behavioral and biological. So I started the foundation in 2004, really focusing on the branding and rebranding. What I did initially for iFred was we did a website, and I had a presentation, and I would go around to everyone that would listen to me, nonprofits, and talk about how we had to change how we were talking about mental health in the space. Because I felt that the community of mental health, supporters were actually creating even more of a stigma by how they were, communicating it to the global community. So I was lucky enough at that point, I got invited to speak at the Global Mental Health Movement, which was started by Vikram Patel, and it's a group of organizations around the world that are focused on creating a movement for global mental health. And that really started my launch into the global network of mental health. I got on the advisory board of that, and then was invited to the World Health Organization to work on the Global Mental Health Action Plan, and I've been attending that conference for the last 10 years. It led to getting on Why Mental Health. We started a youth mental health movement and coalition just about a year and a half ago. And then, as Dr. Kirby was saying, worked on getting mental health in the Sustainable Development Goals. So I was fortunate enough that I got to share my story at the UN and speak to them and why it was so important to add mental health in the Sustainable Development Goals. It's a fundamental to all of the development goals, really. So it's taken me on a really pretty amazing journey in mental health, and a lot of which I never thought would happen, including leading up to this day and working and seeing the kids and talk about hope. With my product line, I got into a major retailer and in the States, and we did a national cause marketing campaign for mental health, and we raised about $1 million through cause marketing, and a portion of that went to IFRED, a number of other charities as well. But we thought, okay, now what do we want to do with this money? I mean, it's very limited money, and I was convinced that had I been treated and given skills when I was young in grade school, that I could have prevented so many of the things that then became a major burden to myself and my family, and cost a lot of money and a lot of treatment. And so I got really into the question of what is, like, how can we prevent it, and how would we go about preventing depression and anxiety? So I started looking at kind of what is the opposite of that, which is hopelessness, and can we actually teach that? Is that something, or teach how to build up hope and not encourage hopelessness? And if so, how would we do that? So with the funding, that's primarily what we decided to do with the money. But we again, so rebranding depression, we did hopeful art. So we have people do sculptures of sunflowers. People plant sunflowers and use that as a way to educate and engage with communities on just mental health overall. So it's a way to gather and have a positive conversation about it. So I started digging into the hopelessness research, what was available at the time, and also hope. And there's a lot more that comes out now about hopelessness, and I think it's pretty, hopelessness is the leading predictor of suicide, and globally, suicide is now the leading cause of death for girls 15 to 19-year-olds. And this just shocks me that we're not, you know, when I look at the statistics that Dr. Kirby presented in Northern Ireland, it's like, why aren't we doing something much more aggressive in this? Because there's plenty of evidence that says we can actually impact change. In the US, 1 of 9 students are actually self-reporting suicide attempts. You know, the statistics in mental health vary quite significantly. These were self-reports, and 40% of those were in grade schools, and that helps kind of educate us on what age range we were going to focus on for hope for our initial attempt at this program, because we wanted to get at the most impactful state, and we knew we had to be focused. You know, hopelessness is the primary symptom of depression and anxiety. Well, and anxiety, it's a symptom of anxiety, and 36% of adolescent girls in the U.S. are depressed before graduating high school. That's a third of our girls. It is rising significantly. 25% of girls in the U.K. before the age of 14. So it's happening so young now. And there was a study just done that 70% of U.S. teens between the age of 13 and 17 said that anxiety and depression are the most critical issues facing themselves and their peers right now. Above anything else, I mean, it was far above, you know, bullying and a number of different issues. Hopelessness is associated with delinquent behavior, weapon carrying on school property, all forms of self-directed violence, and also interpersonal and partner violence. So if we want to focus, if we want to solve the partner violence, we've got to look at hopefulness and hopelessness and hopefulness. It's also higher among the LGBT community, which is 63% versus heterosexual students at 27%. So hopelessness is very high among that community. It's high among those that experience childhood abuse, victims of bullying, and bully victims, which are people that are bullying other people, and victims of bullying, and often a consequence of race-related discrimination. So it goes across a number of different areas. It's been defined as a negative expectation towards oneself and one's future. So there's a helplessness aspect, and then emotional, which is the sadness aspect. So again, what's the opposite? Hope. And I know we talked a little bit about that, but you know, the great thing about hope is it's a universal concept, and it's easily understood in most cultures. So we've done this. I mean, we've introduced this around the world, and people get what hope, like they get why they need to create hope and maintain hope. So, and the challenge, my advisor, Dr. Belfast, says is it's like been operationalizing the concept of hope, but then moving beyond seeing it as just a belief or optimism, but really like, what do you do to create hope? So that's what we've tried to address with the challenge. So it's, and there are a number of different definitions, but having an expectation that is desired and is also possible is the hopeful mindset. And a lot of the programs now focus on resilience, but the research suggests that resilience is an outcome of having hope, that you have to have hope before you can then become resilient. And again, the research suggests, and I was astounded as well when I started looking into it, that hope is a teachable skill. And I thought, well, if hope is teachable, why aren't we taught this? Why aren't we doing more about it? I mean, it seems very clear when looking at all the research around it. And higher hope corresponds to so many things. It's greater emotional and psychological well-being, better physical health, less violence, improved academic performance, you'll do better in school, higher quality leadership, which I found interesting. It's one of the top 3 leadership traits, less stress, less loneliness. So if we want to deal with the loneliness epidemic, we've got to address hope in people. Social connection, less anxiety and depression, better personal relationships, and a less likelihood to die by suicide, which was it's really my goal personally. So Hopeful Minds, 12 core lessons, developed social and emotional learning tools to create and maintain hope throughout life's experience. Again, we focused on a very small age range, and it's like our first attempt at really how can we instill hope, and that's why Ulster has been so helpful in helping us research what's working, what's not, and then how can we expand on the program and grow what we know. And so we got, the best, really the experts. I talked to all the experts in the area about what they know about hope, what they've done to operationalize it, which nobody had been doing it. They'd been writing a lot about the theory, and then got a fantastic advisory board together. I don't have a slide of them because it's like getting updated so much, and I didn't want to not include anyone. But we have really amazing psychologists, psychiatrists, global mental health workers, kids, educators, principals right here, Marie's, helping us, just activists, people that are passionate about it. And then we created with social emotional learning standards in mind, which has been implemented around the world. And in the US, they are starting to mandate social emotional learning in school because they understand all the benefits related to it. So the lesson plan, which Maria will get into the lessons, but they have objectives, critical thinking questions, discussion points, hand-on activities, so we try to engage with the kids. And then we have supplemental projects on the side that if you want to get deeper into it, you can. And then we have resources on depression. We have handouts that can go to parents at home with like signs and symptoms, what to look for in your kids, because we know early identification of mental health and challenges are so important, and parents can help with that. And then we have teacher handouts. So we looked at some of the key things we looked at, which Dr. Kirby touched on, but defining hope, what is supportive of a hopeful state, emotional self-regulation techniques, mindfulness. We talk about goals and pathways to those goals and the obstacles that might come in your way. The importance of brain health and nutrition and how that actually affects our moods. Success is a journey, not getting somewhere, but it's actually how we treat ourselves and other people along the way. Giving hope to others, the importance of passion and having a purpose, and that every child has a purpose here. It's just a matter of exploring and finding what that is. We added this year failure because we noticed that in Northern Ireland in the work, a lot of kids were like, they're hopeful sunflowers. I get a good grade, pass the test, and I thought if that's what they're attaching their hope to, like, what happens if that doesn't happen? And so failure is if a kid fails, oftentimes they internalize it and say, I am a failure, when that's not the case. It's whatever you did to get to that goal failed. And so how can we deconstruct that process? Like, do you need to study earlier? Do you need to study with friends? And how can we make you successful at that? Or how can we help support your successful journey in that? Rumination, creating a network for hope. We know that each child has to have at least one person they can talk to when they don't feel hope. And so making sure each and every child has identified someone that they can talk to. And then the importance of planning and receiving hope. So that in general is the program. We created it with these things in mind. Just in my, coming from a business standpoint, I've seen a lot of the projects come and go in mental health, just being in the space 15 years, and because they have these big visions and then they can't sustain it. So we wanted to do the best we could to create and iterate as we go along and make it free, so that no matter what, it could live on, even if it didn't get funding or wasn't future funded. So it's cost effective. There's no cost to entry really. It's scalable. So we've used it in a number of cultures, South Africa, South America. There's a group in China that's going to start to work with it in Malaysia, Northern Ireland, the US. And it's adaptable for age ranges, cultures, so they change the stories in some cultures. It can be used universally, so this is, just one thing I'll say about Malaysia is we taught the social workers in Malaysia, we took them through the program, and how we did it is we gave out the lessons, they got into groups, and then they read the lesson, and then they taught it back to us, because we wanted to truly understand, would they be able to read this and comprehend it? And they did a phenomenal job of doing that. Each of the lessons they really got when they presented it back to us. But the one thing they didn't get is teaching the whole school approach, so teaching every child in the classroom. They still thought, okay, so I look at you're either mentally well or you're not, and I take those problem children out of the classroom and I take them through this curriculum. And we said, no, don't do that. It's something that every child needs to learn, every person really. And then it makes human and financial sense. So about a year and a half ago, the World Health Organization came out with research that for every dollar you invest in mental health, you get $4 back. Now this is in the workplace and interventions, but we know that for prevention, that return on investment is much higher. And it's been featured around the world. The World Bank featured it as an innovation. I've spoken at the Kennedy Forum and Mental Health America, a number of different conferences, and this has been added to quite a bit as well. Just recently, we launched a Hope Badge on 7 Cups. 7 Cups is a peer-to-peer support app. Anyone can download it. There are 25 million people that are using it around the world in 189 countries, 140 languages. And as I said, we know that each child needs at least one person to talk to. Well, for 13 and above children and adults, you can now log into this app and talk to someone immediately that is in your age range, that has anxiety, that has depression, that will just listen to you. It's been a life-saving app, really, that we encourage everyone to use. There's different trainings you can go through to pay for, but we offered our Hope Badge for free on the 7 Cups platform, so you can actually get a very general sense of the curriculum on the Hope Badge. So I encourage you all to go through it. Yeah, it's amazing what you're doing in Northern Ireland, and we just suggest that anyone, bring it to your communities, bring it to your churches, bring it to your health systems, and integrate the concepts of hope into that, because it's an important trait for all of us. Thank you.